Hello everyone, I call myself Zondagskind and sadly, I didn't like playing Ara History Untold. As you might imagine, I was one of many content creators who jumped on the release of Ara in the hope of falling in love with it, but after just one stream and a couple of mornings trying games out off camera, I was left thoroughly disappointed with it and I just want to record my thoughts. Because just a week later, I bought XCOM 2 off of a very high discount, and I already have 4 times as many hours into XCOM 2 as in Ara, and it's mostly because of how I didn't enjoy Ara. I'll give you the disclaimer that because I didn't play beyond the first stage of the game, even though I didn't see anything in other people's videos on the later eras that I think would fundamentally change my experience, you're welcome to take my opinions with a grain of salt. Also, as a Civ 6 fan, it would of course be very easy to point out all the things I do like about Civ 6 and that I find lacking in Ara, but I want to try and give a critique that is deeper than just make Civ 6.5. So, I'm trying in this video to focus on what Ara wants to be, something that does align with Civ 6 a lot, but sometimes it doesn't. And I've gone out of my way to include some ideas that would move Ara further away from Civ 6. Also, stay tuned, because the last fault I found is so fundamental, so ingrained in the game mechanics, that I'm afraid that Ara is in a significantly worse place now than other games I was underwhelmed by, like Humankind or Millennia. So, what does Ara want to be? Obviously, I can't look into the minds of the developers, and I'm one of those people who thinks a piece of media speaks for itself, and isn't interested in what the developers have said about it in dev diaries. I look mostly at stuff like the intro cinematic, and there's a very clear difference there with Civ 6. Civ 6's base game intro focuses on the forward march of civilization, with a focus on flight as a hallmark of progress, and that's a fair representation of what playing the game feels like, going through the ages and progressing scientifically. Ara focuses on its leaders, Nefertiti overseeing a polar pyramid construction, Shaka and Jeanne d'Arc practicing their javelin throws, Sappho and Copernicus circling an astronomical model. In that way, it actually looks a bit more like the intro of Crusader Kings 3, that focuses on the interactions that a player's character will have in their lifetime, from battles to people trying to backstab them, and it's pretty true to what playing the game feels like. But worse than any bugs, worse than any mechanical weaknesses, Ara isn't a game in which your leaders do much of anything. A genuine selling point of Ara is the big roster of leaders. 42 leaders is a number that Civ 6 didn't get to until its second large DLC. And there are even changeable skins, that's fun. But other than a model that makes some gestures and some narrative events that are based on which leader you ran into, your leaders don't talk, they don't show up on the map, they don't interact, they don't change the look of your empire, and the nation they represent doesn't matter. Ara's devs probably thought that the choice of leader would feel more impactful, because all the abilities and bonuses are linked to the leader, but weirdly, it actually feels more impactful in Civ 6 because your leader is interacting with a national kit. That also changes fundamentally how the empire looks. In Civ 6, Norway, by turn 100, just looks different from Japan, for example. In Ara, what is the point of Alexandros leading Greece, of Hildegard von Bingen leading Germany, or of Elizabeth leading England? They all look the same. Now, beyond me not wanting to just point to Civ 6 for improvements, I also think that Ara should do more with its leaders than Civ, because Civ, as good as it is very economical with its characters. Only 7 voiced lines and some animations with occasional grunts. It's nothing like, for example, XCOM 2, where you have this constant stream of ambient text lines. The Civ does just enough to feel like you've got interesting figures to interact with as a player, but it isn't a game of relationships, it isn't a game of narratives. Also, conversely, I don't think that Ara's devs can open up a can of international voice actors to give their leaders unique voice lines to the extent that Civ 6 does it, let alone getting close to that narrative volume, that narrative density that XCOM 2 has. So, look at how Crusader Kings 3 does it. Of course, Crusader Kings can't have character-specific voices because there's a practically infinite number of characters you can possibly generate, but they do manage to make them feel alive by constructing the game mostly around narrative events, with choices that really matter, that can go wrong and right, and that are partly informed by your character's traits. In Crusader Kings 3, there is a set of animations and backdrops that give you a tableau, and you can then imagine how the moving image looks. It feels somewhat weird because I didn't like it in the early Civ 7 videos, but having the leaders just stand in a room on profile might actually work pretty well for Ara. At least then you have that interaction. Making the managing of relations with other leaders and paragons more important to the gameplay, a la Old World, could also work better than what Ara tries to get away with now. Ara wants you to zoom in a lot more than Civ. A little like Humankind, it wants you to take in the sight of the landscape a lot more. Well, it really doesn't help then that you cannot use a minimap to stay oriented while you zoom in on your cities. You want the graphics to work up close, but zooming in makes it impossible to know where you need to be going with scouts or what a city needs to build. Basically, if I zoom in enough that I can see what the ancient ruins look like, I actually don't know where to move a scout to get it. The more detailed map of Ara makes it a lot more complicated to actually see things well than in Civ with its simple tiles. And I feel like even Humankind, even though it does get very cluttered in the late game, has a better flow between zooming in and the quasi-minimap that you get when zooming out. And another good example is Victoria 3. The map when zoomed in is so gorgeous that just one look at that is what convinced me to buy the game initially, but you can zoom all the way out by holding one button and the map still looks very good. The bottom line is that Ara's unit icons and map shaders and the other visuals don't really help make the game any clearer. The idea of being able to turn in any cardinal direction is cute, but it gets really confusing without a compass or standard orientation to fall back on. The game either needs a complete visual overhaul or, at the very least, a functional minimap. It's funny how Civ 7 is going to see less micromanagement because players complained about the tedium of late game city management, unit movement, and build charges. I'm going to miss builders, but anyway. And then Ara actually went more into the micro, scaling up more towards city building games like City Skylines 2 or Anno 1800. Well, if I never played city builders, I'd accept that maybe Ara is just not my genre, but I feel like I've sung the praises of Ostriv and Manor Lords enough that that's not an excuse. What makes the city builders work, in my opinion, is that you're always working on something that city needs. And while the race to self-sufficiency is very limiting, it also means that your path is clear, and that building, whatever it is, a bakery or a shoemaker, feels very meaningful at that point. A lot of buildings in Ara feel more like the 100th lumber mill in a game of Civ, and crafting is just beyond tedious. Inputting grain into a bakery basically just means your toaster now toasts toast 18% faster! And it's not even a joke. Of course, the UI also makes it frustrating to go through because you can't even properly see the building you're managing, and again, I want to see a baker character or a florist character. Think of the little citizen avatars in Anno 1800. That shouldn't be too hard to implement, and that would really help a lot. I won't mince my words about the warfare in Ara because it feels completely miserable. First, you have to build a unit, which you can only reduce to one turn by throwing money at the problem. Then a unit has to be deployed out of the reserves, which ideally you want to wait a bit on until you have multiple units that you can put into a formation. Then, your city will attempt to muster the units, but if an enemy unit enters your city limits any step of the way on this process, you can have the most modern army in the world sitting idly by as your city gets overrun by a single dude on a horse. Wars also automatically conclude upon the aggressor reaching their goal, and you are then locked into a 20-turn peace treaty, which is basically 6 hours of real time in the tempo that Ara plays at. So, the fact that you can't even meaningfully choose to where to engage an enemy means you have next to no agency in warfare. Something that was actually a big plus of Humankind, albeit one that became tedious as the game went on. Seriously, if the game's If the devs don't alleviate the misery that is their warfare system, there's no chance that I'm ever trying my hand at Ara again. It also boggles the mind how Ara's units are always either victorious or completely destroyed. That is obviously not how battles worked or work in real life, and it makes for miserable encounters if an AI manages to conjure up a battalion that is just a little stronger out of the fog of war. In Europa Universalis 4 or Crusader Kings 3, you can try to disengage from a losing battle at the cost of extra casualties in the pursuit phase. And even a lost battle isn't always a stack wipe, as Paradox players call it, or a one-shot, as we Civers call it. It makes the time you put into finally deploying those units sting all the more that they can run into one brick wall and disappear forever. And also, I understand that this is already going to change in patch 1.1, but I just find it inexcusable that there is no way to upgrade units in 1.0. What is the use of a unit gaining experience in battles if it becomes worthless at the advent of the next strategic resource? Again, rather than just point at features of Civ and call it a to-do list, I actually want to propose something that could make Ara stand out. Give us the option to make ceremonial units out of obsoleted unit types. Similar to the Swiss Guard in real life. It still wears early modern uniforms, a bit like pike and shot units in the 21st century. It's a palace guard, and having a palace guard, you could call it that, give bonuses to its city depending on its battle experience and unit type, could be an interesting piece of both world building, you making your own aesthetics for your empire, and it would make it viable to pivot from warfare into stewardship, basically. Sadly, all these problems, in the end, are all either caused or exacerbated by a fundamental issue. The Ara-killer, if you will. The simultaneous turn system is one that might solve some issues in a multiplayer setting, even of that I am doubtful. But single-player gamers had no need whatsoever for a gimmick like this, and it completely axes whatever immersion you could build off of your actions. In Civ 6, when your scout moves, the fog of war retreats, new tiles open up before you, and you can even see it move if you disable quick movement, which nobody who makes content does, but you can do it when playing at home. You buy a building, and it immediately materializes. In Ostrif, assuming you put an order at the top of the queue, your workers immediately start the construction. In City Skylines 2, buildings instantaneously complete. In XCOM 2, you immediately see your 99% shot fly past the enemy into the brick wall beside it. Yes, it happened to me the first time I was playing it. It's so fundamental to the psychology of playing games that you are rewarded or punished for clicking a button immediately. That the devs of Ara have condemned us to a purgatory of permanently blueprinting everything you do is frankly insane to me. And it's something I'm not even sure can be fixed in a patch, since this is integral to the game mechanics. Humankind didn't work for me, but I think it delivers on its promises, and I just need a bit more personality in my games. But Ara teases a lot of personality in its opening, and then doesn't only fail to deliver that, but it has a system that flies in the face of what makes good games enjoyable. It's just not a good game at this point. At least, that is my opinion. If that is also your opinion, then it would behoove you to leave a like on this video. If you completely disagree, then you must be compelled to defend Ara in the comments, or add to my arguments. In any case, you can subscribe and ding the bell if you want to know when the next video, most likely about Civ 6, is going to come out. Sadly, this is probably going to be the only video I ever make about Ara history Untold. And if you subscribe and ding the bell, then we will see you then. Bye bye.